Some of us are simply a bit bored of hearing people ripping at closed wounds and then crying about their hurt or their presumed hurt, because everybody could do this.
Douglas Murray just tore apart the left's endless victimhood narrative, one designed to keep entire communities trapped in grievance and resentment. The modern left has made an industry out of weaponizing history, using centuries-old slavery and racism as a political bludgeon to shame society into submission. We've seen it before, and we have been consistently seeing it with each passing day.
About this weird trend, I agree with you, I think it's weird, where we're being compelled to just apologize constantly for everything that happened in the past. Why are we doing this?
That's right. It's a very strange act of masochism, really, and an act of masochism carried out by people who don't seem to know anything. I mean, people talk about the British monarchy having to apologise for slavery. It was King George III who signed the Anti-Slavery Act into law in 1807. Prince Albert gave one of the most extraordinary anti-slavery addresses when the British were still policing the anti-slave trade on the high seas in 1840 to the Anti-Slavery League in London. All of this was addressed 200 years ago. And today, unfortunately, there's a kind of new type of malcontent, and usually also a huckster to boot, who just decides that none of this happened. Usually it's because they don't know it happened.
Douglas Murray is spot on here. This endless cycle of self-flagellation over history is not just bizarre, it's utterly pointless. Why are we expected to apologize for events that were already confronted, debated, and legislated against centuries ago? Not to mention there was also massive societal progress. The minorities were granted full protection by legal frameworks, such as the civil rights laws. There has also been a significant cultural shift promoting diversity and inclusion, which contributed to a more leveled society compared to the past decades when discrimination was at large. Yet today, the professional grievance industry pretends none of this ever happened. Why? Because acknowledging it would collapse their entire narrative. These people want to create permanent division, keeping people aggrieved and ensuring a never-ending cycle of guilt payments and political leverage. And let's be honest, this forced historical amnesia isn't accidental, it's cultivated. It's easier to control a population that doesn't know its own history.
I actually agree with Douglas about the fact that we don't know enough. He's absolutely right. We don't know enough, and it's important that we do. But part of the knowledge is also understanding the hurt and pain that were caused, not just about the good things. It's not just about the cherry picking. And wrongs are not about being masochistic. Saying sorry is not a bad thing. Saying sorry is actually a very empowering thing to do.
Why does it matter that a bunch of royals now get forced into issuing grovelling apology? Who cares? How does it change anything? It doesn't do anything, in my estimation, to impact on current slavery, where it exists around the world. It doesn't really make any difference to institutional racism, as we've seen in certain parts of society. I don't know what difference it makes. It might make people feel a bit better to see a royal grovelling, but so what?
This is where the woke argument falls apart entirely. Paula claims it's about understanding the pain, but what she really means is manufacturing perpetual guilt. Nobody is denying history. What's being rejected is this bizarre obsession with forcing people who had nothing to do with past injustices to grovel for sins they never committed. Piers Morgan's question cuts right to the heart of the issue. What does it actually achieve? Does it stop modern slavery? Does it fix crime-ridden inner cities? Does it lift a single person out of poverty? It does absolutely nothing except keep people locked in a cycle of victimhood, while the professional outrage industry profits off of it. And let's be honest, if saying sorry were actually empowering, it would come with an endpoint, but there is none. The goalposts keep moving because this isn't about justice. It's about power. It's about forcing institutions, entire nations, and even individuals to constantly apologize, pay up, and surrender authority to the activist class. That's the real game being played here.
I do think it makes a difference. I do think it makes a difference that people in power are heard to acknowledge pain and hurt. I do think it's important that people in power have taken the time.
But whose pain and hurt are you talking about? It's not people living today. These are going back hundreds of years in some cases, these crimes of slavery and so on. We all agree it was outrageous. It's been debated really year after year after year. We all know this. I don't think that people have a lack of knowledge. And I'm not quite sure where the apology tour ends. What's the end game here?
So the end game is about the ability to understand the true history, not just the part of history that we have been taught. And that is the difficulty. So you're talking about who's the apology for. Well, the apology is for me. The apology is for those who have suffered. The apology is for those who continue to struggle through colonialism and through slavery.
Paula's sense of entitlement is beyond laughable. It's downright embarrassing. She's the perfect example of someone who thrives on selective outrage, conveniently ignoring historical realities that don't fit her narrative. Her entire argument is built on the idea that historical grievances justify endless demands for apologies and reparations, while completely disregarding the actual efforts made to eradicate slavery. Take Britain, for example. After abolishing the slave trade in 1807, the British Empire didn't just talk about ending slavery, it enforced it. The Royal Navy's West Africa Squadron spent nearly 6 decades patrolling the seas, capturing slave ships and freeing thousands of enslaved Africans. That wasn't just virtue signaling, it was action. And yet Paula would have you believe that none of this matters, that the descendants of those who fought and died to end the practice should still be guilt-tripped into issuing meaningless apologies. The reality? This isn't about justice or reconciliation, it's about power, control, and an endless cycle of grievance mongering.
The problem is we've forgotten how to be genuinely proud of our great countries, both America and the United Kingdom, two of the greatest countries in the world. It's almost like every day now, somebody somewhere, normally on the left, the woke left, is queuing up to find a reason to hate the countries and their histories.
Well, it's a kind of grievance competition. Your guest earlier just tried to engage in it. I don't know what hurt she believes she's had from slavery. All of this was addressed 2 centuries ago. Everything has consequences. All history has consequences and ramifications. But, if we were to play this fairly, we would at least look at all of the countries around the world that engaged in the slave trade who are simply not interested in any form of reparations. The Ottoman Empire, all the Arab countries who not just traded far more slaves than across the Atlantic, but castrated all the men so that there wouldn't be any more African slaves after them. They worked them to the bone. I see no interest across Africa in paying reparations for selling their brother and sister Africans into slavery or for working them to the bone to the present day. There is slavery across Africa today. In fact, there are more slaves in the world today than there were at the height of the transatlantic slave trade. So some of us are simply a bit bored of hearing people ripping at closed wounds and then crying about their hurt or their presumed hurt, because everybody could do this. 1 million Europeans were stolen by North Africans over the course of decades of the North African Barbary pirate slave trade. Where would you end if you did that? The answer is you couldn't end, because nobody is alive who has actually suffered the hurt, and nobody is alive who did the wrong.
Douglas Murray has dismantled the hypocrisy perfectly. If this is really about justice, why are these activists so selective in their outrage? Why America and Britain, two of the greatest forces for freedom and progress in human history, are now being treated like villains in their own stories? The woke left isn't just chipping away at national pride for fun. It's part of a broader ideological project to dismantle the foundations of Western civilization by erasing history, discrediting national heroes, and turning patriotism into a dirty word. They create a population that's easier to control, a population that no longer believes in itself or its own values. And once national identity is hollowed out, what fills the void? A centralized, top-down ideological state that dictates what can and cannot be thought, said, or celebrated. The rise of critical race theory and deconstructionism in academia has fueled this movement. These ideologies don't just analyze history, they actively seek to tear it down, turning everything into a struggle between oppressors and victims. National identity isn't seen as something that unites people through shared values and aspirations. It's painted as an oppressive structure that must be dismantled. The result? A society that's divided, cynical, and ashamed of itself. And here's the real danger. When a society is constantly at war with its own past, it loses focus on the real threats of the present. Illegal immigration, failing education systems, economic instability. These are the urgent challenges of our time. But instead of tackling them, we're stuck in an endless cycle of manufactured outrage over historical grievances that cannot be changed.
I am so sorry that Douglas is bored by the pain that has come
That's not what he said.
through slavery.
He didn't say.
I'm
He
so
didn't say.
tired.
But what you're
That
doing
he
there, what
is
you're doing,
not-
yeah. But hang on,
that he
Paula.
is not
Paula, you're being very
bothered.
disingenuous. That's not
I
what he
don't
said.
think I am, and I
viewers
think
aren't
if you
stupid.
read his article-
They know exactly what he said.
You
He's
are.
not saying he's bored by the pain. He's saying, and I think it's a perfectly valid point. The pain that people who are alive today are claiming they're suffering for what happened 200 or 300 years is it's not a real pain. They're not the ones who suffered what was going on 200 or 300 years ago.
So, in terms of justice for all, I mean, I think we'd all agree that there
Well,
should
I'm
be
not
justice.
suffering from when the
I think-
Normans
I think
invaded
we'd
this
all
country.
agree.
I'm not suffering from what my ancestors went through.
Demanding modern people apologize for the sins of their ancestors is not just absurd, it's dangerous. It fuels resentment, deepens divides, and does absolutely nothing to promote real reconciliation. A healthy society acknowledges its past, learns from it, and moves forward. And let's be real, most of the black community Paula claims to speak for don't want to be used as political pawns, and they certainly aren't interested in playing the perpetual victim. Millions of black Americans and Britons are thriving, working professional jobs, owning homes, and enjoying the same rights as everyone else. They're not sitting around demanding apologies for events that happened centuries ago. So why should a normal black citizen who lives, works, and succeeds alongside everyone else suddenly demand an apology from people who had nothing to do with slavery? Why should they embrace victimhood when they have every opportunity to take ownership of their lives? The truth is, they don't, but the woke left needs them to, because without an oppressed class to prop up their narratives, their entire agenda collapses.